Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy. Here we share new confessions every day.
The day my parents decided to hand over everything to my brother, Tage, felt like a slow-motion betrayal. Not because they shouted it at me, not because they threw insults or slammed doors, but because they did it so calmly, as if I were invisible. As if I didn't exist anymore. "I'm sorry, Skylar," my mother said softly, almost rehearsed, her eyes avoiding mine. "Tage deserves this more. He's always been the one who carried the family. It's just how it has to be." I was 32. 32 years of birthdays, holidays, fights, and dreams, all suddenly erased with those words. The family home in Santa Cruz, the small but thriving company my parents built from scratch, and even the cash reserves, all signed over to him. I remember sitting there at the kitchen table, the wooden surface scratched and worn, a coffee cup in my trembling hands. Tage was across from me, trying to smile like everything was fine. He was 28, charismatic and ambitious, the golden son everyone praised. But me? I was the quiet one, the one who always worked late nights, the one who sacrificed. The one who never got the spotlight. That morning, I woke up feeling like the world was perfectly fine, but by noon, my future was stolen. I replayed my mother's words over and over, "He deserves it more." As if my dreams were less valuable. As if my efforts never mattered. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run away. But instead, I swallowed my pride, nodded, and said nothing. Because pride, as I learned, can be a shield. I left the house with my head held high, pretending the betrayal didn't burn beneath my skin. I drove back to my tiny apartment in Oakland, the streets busy with life and noise that only made me feel more alone. Sitting on the edge of my worn-out couch, I stared at the city lights through the window. I thought about every late night I spent drafting business plans, every idea I pitched that was brushed aside, every time I stayed silent while Tage was praised. They didn't see me. Not really. But I saw myself. And I promised, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Because even when family turns their backs, you can still stand. You can still fight. They might have taken everything from me today. But they haven't taken who I am. Not yet. The days after that conversation were the hardest silence I've ever known. It wasn't the absence of noise, the city around me buzzed endlessly, but the absence of family. The absence of them. I didn't hear from mom or dad. Tage didn't call, didn't check if I was okay. It was like I'd vanished overnight. The house I grew up in, the memories etched into its walls, suddenly belonged to a stranger. I kept replaying every moment we'd shared, trying to find a clue, a sign, anything that could explain why they chose him over me. But all I found was a cold, indifferent quiet. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Skylar, the mortgage payment is due next week. Please make sure it's covered." A simple text. No apology. No explanation. Just a demand, like I was still responsible for the family's debt. I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. My heart pounded, but my reply was calm. "We have a heir for that now." It wasn't cruel. It was a statement of fact. They had everything, including the burden. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about how they'd built their lives around Tage, the perfect son. The one who never questioned, who never challenged, who just took what was given. I wasn't that person. And they never would be. Instead of wallowing, I began to plan. I opened a notebook, scribbled ideas for my own business, my own future. I scrolled through job listings, looked for opportunities. I reminded myself, this isn't a defeat. It's a wake-up call. My family had chosen their golden boy. But I was ready to become my own kind of gold. I promised myself one thing: no more waiting for their approval. No more depending on their love that came with conditions. From now on, I'm the one writing my story. The morning after I sent that message to Mom, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. For the first time, the weight of their judgment didn't crush me, it fueled me. I started by facing the hardest truth: I needed to build myself from scratch. Without their safety net, without their approval. Just me, Skylar, and my own fire. I found a small, cheap co-working space in Oakland, tucked away between a vegan cafe and an old record store. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I spent hours there, sketching out business plans, researching markets, and slowly weaving together an idea I was passionate about: a boutique consulting firm focused on sustainable startups, something my family's company had never cared about. At night, I worked on my resume, polished my LinkedIn profile, and reached out to old contacts, many of whom I'd neglected while wrapped up in family drama. I reminded myself, connections were my bridge to freedom. I couldn't afford therapy, but I journaled obsessively. I wrote about the betrayal, the silence, the anger, and, strangely, the hope. Writing became my therapy, my rebellion, my way of reclaiming my voice. There were nights I cried. Nights I questioned everything. But every morning, I forced myself out of bed with a new mantra: I am not what they decided I was. I am what I choose to become. One afternoon, I got a call from an old college friend, Cashin, who had just launched a green tech startup in San Francisco. He needed help navigating investors. I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't just a job. It was a lifeline. And as I helped Cashin grow his company, I felt my confidence return. I was no longer just Tage's sister. I was Skylar, the woman who refused to be sidelined. Meanwhile, the world they'd given Tage was starting to show cracks. I heard whispers through mutual friends: the business was struggling under his leadership, the house was going into disrepair, and the cash reserves were drying up. But I didn't celebrate. I was focused on my own path, and I knew true success wasn't about revenge. It was about rising, no matter what. Working with Cashin wasn't just a job, it was a revelation. For the first time in years, I felt the rush of creating something meaningful, something that could stand on its own. But that didn't mean the ghosts of my family were far behind. Every success was shadowed by a quiet, persistent question: why wasn't I enough for them? The weight of their expectations, or rather, their lack of belief in me, pressed down like a heavy fog. One evening, after a long day of meetings and investor pitches, I drove back to my apartment. The city was alive with light and sound, but inside, I felt hollow. My phone buzzed. A message from Tage. "We need to talk. Mom's worried about you." I stared at it, the familiar sting of betrayal and loss mixing with a strange flicker of something else: curiosity. Hope. But I didn't reply. Because I realized something crucial: I wasn't going to be pulled back into their drama. Not anymore. That night, I wrote in my journal: I am not their consolation prize. I am the architect of my own destiny. I doubled down on my work, fueled by that truth. I studied market trends, attended networking events, and learned everything I could about building a sustainable business. The path wasn't easy. I faced rejection, late nights, and moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But each challenge only sharpened my resolve. I surrounded myself with new people, mentors, friends, allies, who saw me for who I was, not whose sister I had been. And slowly, my world began to change. The consulting firm grew. Small clients turned into bigger ones. I hired my first employee, a bright young woman named Lila, who reminded me of myself when I was just starting out, eager, ambitious, but unsure. Watching Lila thrive was like watching my future unfold. Meanwhile, my family's silence remained deafening. No calls, no invitations, no apologies. They had made their choice. And I had made mine. To build a life where I was valued. To create success on my own terms. To finally be free. Months passed, and my consulting firm, Verdant Strategies, was no longer just a side project. It had become my lifeline, my fortress. Every client I brought in, every deal I closed, chipped away at the shadow my family had cast over me. I started attracting attention. Not just from startups, but from investors who admired my vision for sustainability. People began calling me Skylar Quinn, not Tage's sister. It was intoxicating. But success didn't come without its own battles. The boardroom was a battlefield, and I had to prove, time and time again, that I belonged. One day, at a pitch meeting in San Francisco's financial district, I faced a panel of stone-faced venture capitalists. The lead investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Marissa, questioned every assumption in my proposal. When she asked about my background, I said, I'm the founder of Verdant Strategies. I've spent the last year helping over a dozen startups grow sustainably. She leaned in. And your family's company? I hear your brother runs it. I didn't flinch. Yes, but I'm building something entirely different. I'm not here to follow in their footsteps, I'm here to create my own path. Her eyes softened. Good. Because this world needs more people who don't settle. That moment felt like a turning point, not just professionally, but personally. But while I was building my empire, my family's world was unraveling. Word got back to me that Tage's leadership was failing. The company my parents left him was bleeding money. The house in Santa Cruz was falling apart. And the cash reserves. Nearly gone. I heard they called me, behind my back, the lost daughter, the one who gave up. But I didn't care. I had chosen freedom over false loyalty. I was no longer the shadow. I was the light. That night, I sat on the rooftop of my apartment, city lights sparkling below. I pulled out my phone and deleted all messages from my family. No more distractions. No more false hopes. From now on, it was just me, my team, and the future I was creating, on my own terms. By the time I hit the 1-year mark with Verdant Strategies, I'd learned a painful but necessary truth. Success isn't just about climbing the ladder, it's about cutting loose the chains that hold you down. For years, I was tethered to a family that saw me as less worthy, less capable, less deserving. Their love came with strings attached, strings I was finally ready to sever. One afternoon, I received a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a worn photo of my parents, Tage, and me from when we were kids, smiling on a beach in Monterey. Tucked behind it was a note in my mother's handwriting. We hope you find your way back. I stared at it for a long time, the old wounds bubbling up. But this time, instead of despair, I felt something else, clarity. I wasn't broken. I was whole. I wasn't lost. I was found. That same week, a major breakthrough happened. Verdant Strategies secured its largest client yet, a fast-growing eco-friendly brand headquartered in Portland. The contract was a game-changer, doubling our revenue and validating everything I'd worked for. At the celebration dinner, my team toasted to resilience, vision, and independence. Lila raised her glass, eyes shining. To Skylar, who showed us what it means to fight with grace. I smiled, realizing that this family I built was stronger than the one I was born into. I had broken the chains of expectation, betrayal, and silence. Now, I was free. And nothing, no legacy, no betrayal, could ever take that away from me. Months after securing the Portland contract, something shifted inside me. The hunger for approval from my birth family faded, replaced by a quiet, unwavering confidence. I no longer needed their validation. I had built my own kingdom. The office buzzed with energy. Verdant Strategies wasn't just a consulting firm anymore, it was a movement. Startups flocked to us, eager for guidance on how to grow without sacrificing their values. One rainy morning, I found myself reflecting on the journey while staring out my office window overlooking the Bay Bridge. The city's fog blurred the skyline, mirroring the uncertainty I once felt. But now, that fog had lifted. That day, a call came in from an old family acquaintance, someone I hadn't heard from in years. "Skylar," the voice was tentative. "It's your father. We want to meet. We want to make things right." For a moment, my heart faltered. But I knew better now. I had learned the hard way that words mean little without action. I told them, "I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in respect." They hesitated. Then the line went silent. I didn't expect anything else. That evening, I sat with Lila and my closest team members, sharing the call. They nodded in understanding. "Your strength is inspiring," Lila said softly. "You've built a family here, one that believes in you." I smiled. It wasn't the loud, dramatic confrontation some expect in stories like mine. It was a quiet victory, one where I chose peace over bitterness, growth over resentment. And as I looked around the room at the faces of people who believed in me, I realized something profound. Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stands by you when the world turns its back. The months following that phone call were a test of my resolve. Every day, I poured everything I had into Verdant Strategies, pushing boundaries, innovating, proving that I wasn't just a survivor, I was a leader. My mornings began with early runs along the Embarcadero, the cool breeze from the bay clearing my mind. I used those moments to plan, to dream bigger. I knew freedom wasn't just financial independence, it was emotional, mental, and spiritual liberation. One afternoon, as I reviewed a new proposal for a client expanding into Seattle, I got a message from Tage. "Can we meet? There are things we need to discuss." His words carried the weight of unfinished business, but I felt no rush to reply. Instead, I took a deep breath and typed back. "I'm open to talking. When and where?" We met at a quiet cafe in Berkeley, away from the prying eyes and family drama. Tage looked different, tired, worn, but also humbled. He began to speak about the mistakes he'd made, the pressure of living up to expectations, and how losing me had been the hardest blow of all. I listened. Not because I wanted to forgive him, at least not yet, but because I needed to understand where we stood. After hours of conversation, we agreed on one thing: the past couldn't be undone, but maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward, on our terms. Leaving the cafe, I felt lighter. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a new beginning. That night, I added to my journal. Freedom isn't forgetting the past. It's making peace with it, and choosing your own path. I was no longer a prisoner of their choices. I was the architect of my future, one built on strength, dignity, and the freedom to be unapologetically myself. After that meeting with Tage, I realized that healing isn't linear. It's messy, slow, and sometimes painful. But it's necessary if you want to move forward without carrying the weight of the past on your shoulders. Over the next few weeks, Tage and I kept in touch, cautiously, deliberately. We weren't family in the way we once were, but we were two people who had shared history and wounds. Our conversations were honest, sometimes raw. He admitted how lost he'd felt trying to live up to everyone's expectations, and how handing everything by default to him had been a burden no one warned him about. I told him about my struggles, the loneliness, the fight to be seen beyond just the other sibling. Through this, I realized that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or reopening old wounds. It means setting boundaries, understanding each other's pain, and choosing peace over resentment. I began to rebuild my relationship with Tage on my terms, a relationship based on respect, honesty, and mutual support, rather than entitlement or guilt. At the same time, I maintained my distance from my parents. I wasn't ready to open that door yet. Their betrayal was deep, and some scars take longer to heal. But this new connection with Tage gave me hope that family can be redefined, rebuilt with intention and care. Back at Verdant Strategies, business was booming. Lila and I celebrated our biggest quarter yet. The firm was becoming a beacon for other women entrepreneurs, a testament to resilience and reinvention. That night, I looked at the city skyline, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. I was no longer a victim of my family's choices. I was a woman who'd carved her own destiny, on her own terms, with strength, grace, and boundaries that protected her heart. It's been 3 years since my family handed everything to Tage, the house, the company, the cash, with those cold words, "He deserves it more." 3 years of fighting, building, breaking, and rising. Today, I'm sitting in my own office, a spacious loft in downtown Oakland, filled with sunlight and life. Verdant Strategies is thriving, with a diverse team that feels like family. We've helped over 50 startups grow sustainably, and I'm recognized as a leader in the industry. But success isn't just about numbers or titles. It's about peace. About waking up every morning knowing I am enough, without needing anyone else's approval. I'm not in contact with my parents anymore. Their chapter is closed. Tage and I have an understanding, a cautious respect that didn't exist before. We're both different people now, shaped by our own struggles. Most importantly, I've learned that family isn't only blood. It's the people who show up, who believe in you, who see your worth. Looking back, their betrayal was the cruelest gift, because it forced me to find my own strength, my own voice. I am no longer the daughter they overlooked. I am the woman I chose to become. And that choice, that freedom, is mine, forever.